So, good morning. Welcome back to another day of English. Um, Wanted to go over a couple things here for the classwork assignment for today. Uh, that would be B Day for those of you who are going to meet on Tuesday, and it'll be posted as the C Day classwork for the other classes. But you can see it says Act 4 review and Act 5, so I'm going to talk about what that entails in a second. But just wanted to also say today would be the last day of the quarter. Any work that you owe me would be due. Specifically, the most recent assignments from Friday and from Monday. So the Modernizing Mercy speech, as well as the Act 4 discussion board. So make sure you've turned those in and posted, done what you need to do for those, so you get full credit. For today, what I want you to do, I wanted to kind of go over a little bit with Act 4, review some of the questions, and then have you read Act 5, beginning at a certain point, which I'm going to point out to you today. But if you can see here, I pull up the Merchant of Venice version on the left and your questions on the right, your study guide, as we're finishing those up. And I just kind of skipped over some of the questions that I know you guys were able to get because we've talked about the mercy speech, or you've written about it, which was number 5. But I wanted to focus beginning on question number 6. So 6 through 8 are going to be the last questions really dealing with Act 4. And kind of setting that up for what's going to happen also in Act 5, I wanted to direct you towards this part on the left, which is Act 4, Scene 1, line 295. And this is where Bassanio and Graciano both are going to make comments that are going to irritate their wives to a certain extent. When Bassanio says that he would sacrifice his wife to save his friend Antonio at the trial, he doesn't realize, of course, that his wife Portia is there hearing this in disguise, and she makes a remark about that here. And then the same thing with Graciano is that he says he would do the same thing, that he would sacrifice his wife, or rather have her in heaven so that she could get God to basically change Shylock from being so evil. So Nerissa is going to make a same kind of remark that Portia made about not being happy to hear her new husband, say that. And that's going to kind of set up something that's going to happen at the end of Act 4 and carry over into Act 5. It's going to wrap the play up. Anyway, so if you go to question number 6, it's that even though Portia has acknowledged that Shylock has the right to collect Antonio's flesh, how is she able to prevent Shylock from receiving it? And so this is that part right here in Act 4, when Scene 1, when Portia says, right before Shylock's ready to basically carry it out, so she gives him up until the last moment to back away from and decide not to go through with it, but he does approach Antonio with the knife and is ready to cut him, and Portia stops him right before that and then says, well, look, the bond, the agreement, doesn't mention anything about blood. It only mentions a pound of flesh. And so therefore, if you were to take the flesh, and which you're entitled to, but if you were to take the flesh and any blood was to come as a result, then you would be in violation of the bond, and therefore you would be punished by the state of Venice, and you would be, as it says here, all your lands and goods would be confiscated. So this is really the loophole that Portia is able to find in the bond to keep Shylock from being able to take the flesh from Antonio. So she's basically saving Antonio here. Remember, earlier in the play, she dealt with her own issue with words and with a riddle with the lottery, where she was kind of trapped by that. And not that she was the one who got away out of that, but she did, give a hint at least to Bassanio at some point about sacrifice that may have given him the idea about the theme of the lottery. So she's able to come in and save Antonio, really becoming the hero of the play, defeating Shylock. She adds to this by even saying, look, not only can you not take blood, but you also would only be entitled to an equal pound of flesh, which would be very difficult to cut from a living person, an exact pound of flesh. So she basically has two aspects of the agreement that she's able to kind of hold up to Shylock to say, you're entitled to this, but you would have to make it perfectly 1 pound, and that there couldn't be blood. So by her coming up with those two, sort of really literal translations of the bond, it's going to prevent Shylock from being able to collect that. And so Shylock then realizes he's been defeated. He's willing to basically take the money. Portia says, no, you're not entitled to that either. You've basically turned that down. So now he's not even going to get, forget the extra money that he was offered, but not even the original $3,000 that he lent out to Antonio and Bassanio. So the idea is that he's getting nothing, and he's going to walk away with nothing. As he starts to do that, though, Portia says, well, wait, because of what you've done is basically an attempt on the life of a citizen, Antonio, your punishment could be to have everything taken from you, all your possessions, as well as your life. The Duke could basically take your life from you. And sorry about that. Just going to do that. Okay. The Duke could also basically take your life from you. And that's what I had you guys write about in the Act 4 discussion, where basically you could say, you had to say whether that was or the punishment was merciful or not. Well, one of the parts that was merciful was what the Duke says, which is basically when Portia says you need to beg mercy of the Duke, and the Duke says, look, I'm not going to take your life, right? This is what Portia says right here. And the Duke says, look, I'm not going to take your life, so I pardon you that. But then they start formulating Shylock's punishment, which the final version of that punishment, number 7, was what I posted on yesterday's discussion board. That he has to give half of his money to Antonio. He has to give all of his money to Jessica, his daughter, after he dies. And that he has to become a Christian, right? And so that's pretty much the end of the trial. I'm going to talk more about that a little bit tomorrow too, as we wrap up the play and the study guide a little bit. But anyway, so there's this little brief scene here at the end of Act 4 that carries over into technically Scene 2, but it's all really part of the continuation of the trial, which is where Portia and Nerissa are going to ask their husband for their rings. And this is because the Duke says to Bassanio, look, this person saved your friend's life. You should offer them something. And they offer Portia, disguised as Balthazar, they offer her money. She turns that down. It's her own money, but she basically says, no, that's not necessary. But she does ask for Bassanio's ring. And Bassanio says, oh, it's not really that big of a deal. And Portia says, no, that's really what I want. And Bassanio initially says, look, my wife gave it to me and promised me not to give it away. So he basically does uphold the vow, the promise that he made earlier in Act 3, not to give the ring away. But he, because Antonio asked him to do it, he does pass that ring along. And Gratiano is going to do the same thing. And that's going to carry over into what's going to happen in Act 5 when everyone's reunited at Belmont, right? And that's what I want you guys to read for today, which is basically to read Act 5. However, I'm going to ask you to start not at the very beginning, but to start on line 120, which is basically where Portia is going to enter. And so Portia's going to come in and say, Portia's going to come in and basically say, Sorry about that, guys. I don't know if you heard that. That was my dog Sizzle wanting to go out for a walk. Anyway, so where was I? So finishing up, yeah. So what I want you guys to read for today for Act 5. As I said, you can start on not just Portia's entrance, but where Portia starts talking to Lorenzo, which would be line 120 of Act 5. There's only one scene in Act 5, so line 120 of Act 5, Scene 1. And Lorenzo is going to greet Portia, and then eventually, very shortly thereafter, Bassanio, Antonio, Graciano, all those guys are going to enter as well. And so the big thing that needs to get resolved here at the end of the play in Act 5 is for Portia to reveal, Portia and Nerissa both really, to reveal what role they served at the trial. And they're basically going to do that through this issue, or through this idea of the rings that their husbands gave them in the previous act. And they're going to ask their husbands for the rings, or ask them where their rings are. And that's going to really be the lead up into how Portia and Nerissa are going to reveal the role they really played at the trial. But the big theme here in Act 5, Act 4 is all about mercy. And Act 5 is really going to focus on this concept of harmony. So that's what I want you to really look at in answering the questions for Act 5. There will be some surprising news that Antonio will get from Portia. That's going to be one of the questions, but also the concept of harmony. And think of it in terms not so much music, although that's really where it comes from, but the idea of friendship and relationships and the coming together of all these characters at the end. The final questions here, number 11 is going to ask about salvation, or how the characters are saved. So I want to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. So for today, you're really focusing on questions 9 and 10 and just finishing the play out. And then tomorrow I'll talk a little bit more about 11 and 12. 12 is going to be specifically for the movie, which I'm going to direct you to more towards next class. So where we're looking as far as ending up the study guide in the play this week, but having you complete that study guide and submit that by the end of this week, so the end of Friday, or by the end of the day Friday, and that would be a fourth quarter grade. Before we move on, as I mentioned before, or mentioned earlier yesterday, our next work is going to be a separate piece. And so just so you're aware, I have posted that. It says here that a separate piece, the reading schedule and PDF of the novel are both now posted on Veracross. And so if you would look under... I'm just going to go to here, your website. If you go to the website, you'll see the different dates for that. Looking to read chapters 1 through 3 by the end of this week, and then the next, in groups of 3, basically chapters over the next few weeks. And then under resources, I have posted I mentioned it today, that I would post a full text PDF of that, so that's there as well. So that's it for today. That's what I want you guys to work on. And like I said, I'll post some more tomorrow. I'll post another video tomorrow that will be focusing on those last 2 questions on the study guide, and then directing you back toward to the movie to watch the last 25 minutes or so. And then I'll come back on after that and we'll review that, and then before we move on to a separate piece. So, like I said, quarter ends, so if you owe me something, make sure you take care of it. If you have any questions, email me, and I'll see you guys soon. Talk to you later. Bye.